What if the one thing standing between you and your greatest dream is a language? In today's story, you'll meet someone who turned English into the key that unlocked her entire future. And the result is more surprising than you can imagine. To discover her secret and get more stories that inspire, subscribe now and ring the notification bell so you don't miss what's next. Her name is Sophia, and her story begins in Brazil. I was born in a small town in Brazil. My family was not rich and we were not poor. We were what you would call a middle-class family. We always had enough to live, but we could not afford luxuries, those extra expensive things. My parents worked very, very hard every single day. My father was a taxi driver and my mother was a school teacher. They always told me the same thing. Sophia education is the key to success. Since I was a little girl, I had only one dream. I wanted to become a doctor. I still remember the exact moment that changed my life forever. I was only 10 years old. My family was in the hospital because my little brother was very sick. He had a very high fever, and we were all so scared. I remember seeing my parents crying, and my heart felt heavy and afraid. Then a doctor came into the room. He was calm, he was confident, and he was full of kindness. He looked at my worried parents, and he smiled. He said, "Don't worry, I will take care of your son." I watched him as he worked. He gently checked my brother. He gave him some medicine, and he spoke with so much knowledge and care. And then, after a few hours, my brother's fever was gone. He was safe. In that moment, watching that kind doctor, I knew with all my heart. One day, I will become a doctor, and I will save lives just like he did. But as I grew up, I realized something terrible. If you want to become a doctor, you need English. 100%. All the important medical books are written in English. All the new medical research is published in English. Even in my own country, doctors needed to know English to study, to communicate with other doctors around the world, and to work in the best hospitals. And my English was terrible. I went to a public school where they taught very little English. I knew some basic words like hello and how are you. But when I saw a full sentence written in English, I felt completely lost. The words looked like a secret code. I remember one day in my English class, my teacher looked at me and said, "Sophia, can you please read this sentence?" I looked down at the book. The words seemed to be dancing on the page. I could not read them. I could not understand them. I wanted to cry. I looked up at my teacher and whispered, "I don't know, miss." Some of the other students in the class laughed. My face felt hot with shame. That day, I went home and sat all alone in my room. I thought to myself, how will I ever become a doctor if I can't even read one simple sentence in English? I felt hopeless. It felt like my dream was an impossible one. But then something happened that changed everything. One evening, my father came home from a long, tiring day of work. He came and sat next to me on my bed. He asked Sophia, "What is wrong?" "You are always so sad these days." I looked at him, and the words just came out. "Papa, I want to become a doctor, but my English is so bad. Without English, I cannot study medicine." My father was quiet for a long time. He just looked at me thinking. Then he said something that surprised me. "If English is the thing that is stopping you, then you must learn English. You should go to a place where everyone speaks English." I was shocked. "But Papa," I said, "we don't have the money for that." He smiled a small, tired smile. He said, "We don't have much, but we have enough." Your dreams are important, Sophia. That night, my parents and I sat together at the kitchen table. We talked about the best place for me to go to learn English. Why did we choose Canada? Well, there were a few very important reasons. First, everyone there speaks English. I would have no choice but to speak English every single day. Second, Canada has a great education system with some of the best schools for learning English. Third, it is known for being a multicultural and friendly country. People in Canada are often warm and kind to international students. And fourth, it was more affordable. Studying in the USA or the UK was just too expensive for us, but Canada was possible. It was not an easy decision. My parents had some savings, but not much. They made a huge sacrifice for me. They used almost all of their savings to pay for my airplane ticket, my English school, and my first few months of living expenses in Canada. Before I left, my mother held my hands. She looked into my eyes and said, "Sophia, we are giving you everything we have. Promise me you will not give up." I had tears in my eyes. I hugged her tightly and said, "I promise, Mama, I will not give up." And so, with one suitcase, a little bit of money, and a very big dream, I flew to Canada. The moment I landed at the airport in Toronto, Canada, I felt like I was on a different planet. The weather was freezing. In Brazil, it was almost always warm, but here my hands felt like ice. The food was strange. I missed my mother's delicious homemade Brazilian rice and beans so much. The people seemed nice, but they spoke so fast. It was a blur of sound. And then I faced my biggest problem, the English language. At the airport, a man came up to me and asked, "Hey, do you need a taxi?" I panicked. I didn't understand what he said. My mind went blank. I just smiled nervously and said, "Yes." Then he said something else. "Where to?" I had absolutely no idea what he said. My brain just stopped working. Finally, feeling embarrassed, I pulled out my phone and showed him the address I had saved. That night alone in my small rented room, I cried. I thought, what am I doing here? I can't understand anything. How will I survive? For the very first time in my life, I felt completely and totally alone. The next day, I went to my English language school. The teacher smiled at everyone and said, "Welcome, everyone. Let's introduce ourselves." When it was my turn, I stood up. My hands were shaking. I managed to say, "My name, Sophia. From Brazil." I wanted to say more. I wanted to tell them about my dream. But my mind was empty. The words were stuck in my throat. The teacher smiled kindly, but I saw some of the other students laughing quietly. I sat down and felt so humiliated. That night, I made a decision. I told myself no matter how hard it is, and no matter how many mistakes I make, I will learn English. I made a plan. I promised myself that I would do everything possible to become fluent. And that right there was the real beginning of my English learning journey. I still remember my first few weeks in Canada so clearly. It was like stepping into a new world. It was exciting, yes, but it was also terrifying. Everything was different. In my country, I understood everything around me. But here, I felt like a baby who was just learning how to speak. Before I tell you exactly how I improved my English, let me tell you about some of the strangest things I noticed in Canada. First, there were no school uniforms. In Brazil, all students wore uniforms, but in Canada, children wore whatever they wanted. I even saw some students wearing pajamas to school, and nobody seemed to care. Next, people don't touch each other very much. In my country, we are very warm. We hug, we kiss on the cheek, and we stand close when we talk. But in Canada, people like their personal space. If you hug someone without asking, first they might feel a little uncomfortable. The weather changes in seconds. 1 minute it's beautiful and sunny. The next minute it can be raining or even snowing. I also saw self-checkout in stores for the first time. In many supermarkets, there was no cashier. People scanned and paid for their own groceries. I thought that was amazing. And people say sorry for everything. It was so funny to me. Even if you step on their foot by accident, they will say sorry to you. And the food portions are huge. I once ordered a small meal at a restaurant, and it was enough food for 3 people. But the biggest shock of all was the English. People spoke so fast, and they used so much slang I had never heard before. In my school in Brazil, I learned proper formal English. But in real life, people said things like, "Wanna grab a coffee?" instead of, "Do you want to get a coffee?" Or they would say, "I'm down for that," which means I agree. Or they'd say, "That's so lit," which means that's amazing. I felt like I had never studied English at all in my life. On my second day in my English class, I was still so nervous. The teacher gave us a simple writing task. I was excited. I can do this, I thought. But when she returned my paper, it was covered in red marks. She said to me, "Sophia, your writing is good, but your sentence structure needs work. You are thinking in Portuguese and then translating it directly to English. That's why it sounds a little strange." I felt so frustrated. Speaking was even worse. The teacher would ask me a question, and I knew the answer in my head. I could see the words in Portuguese, but when I opened my mouth to speak English, nothing came out. I felt like crying. I asked myself, will I ever be able to speak English fluently? But I refused to stay weak in English. I knew that if I did not improve my dream of becoming a doctor, would die right there in that small, cold room in Canada. So I made a serious plan. First was the headphone trick. This was for talking to myself in public. One of my biggest problems was speaking. I was too shy and too afraid of making mistakes. So I found a clever solution. I put on my headphones and walked around the city pretending that I was on a phone call. But really, I was talking to myself in English. I described everything I saw around me. I would say quietly, "I am walking on the street. The sky is blue today. That woman is wearing a red coat. Now I am entering a café. I think I will order a coffee." This little trick helped me to practice thinking in English and to speak without feeling afraid. Next was the 3 new words rule. Every single day I learned 3 new English words. But I didn't just learn them. I had to use them in a real sentence that day. This made the words stick in my memory. Finally, I made a rule: no more subtitles. At first, I watched all my movies in English with English subtitles. But then I realized something important. I was reading, not listening. So I made the brave decision to turn the subtitles off. I forced myself to understand by just listening. It was very hard at first, but soon I started to catch common words and then whole phrases. One day, I went to a coffee shop. I decided, today I will talk to someone in English, no matter what happens. I walked to the counter. The barista, the person who makes the coffee, smiled and said, "Hey, what can I get you today?" My heart was beating so fast. I told myself, "Don't panic, Sophia. You can do this." I took a deep breath and said slowly and clearly, "I would like a cappuccino, please." She smiled and asked, "Do you want it with almond milk or regular milk?" I understood her. I understood her question perfectly. I quickly said, "Regular milk, please." She gave me my coffee and said, "Here you go. Have a great day." And I replied, "You too." It was a very small conversation, but for me, I felt like I had won a gold medal. That day, I realized something very important. Learning English is not about being perfect. It's about being confident. Learning English was one challenge, but just surviving in Canada was another. Canada is an expensive country. Let me tell you what I spent each month. For my small room, which I shared with a roommate to save money, I paid $800. For groceries, I spent about $250. I learned to cook all my meals at home to save money. For transportation, my bus pass in Toronto cost $120. My phone bill was $50. And my English classes cost $500 every month. I worked part-time in a small café to help pay my bills. It was a very tough time. I would wake up at 6:00 a.m., go to my English classes, then go to work in the café. I would come home late feeling so tired, but I still had to study English at night. I missed my family so much. I missed my home. But every single time I felt like giving up, I remembered my parents' sacrifice. I remembered my promise to my mother. I could not fail them. The biggest turning point for me was when I finally stopped translating in my head. At first, my brain always did this. I would hear a sentence in English. Then I would translate it into Portuguese in my head. Then I would think of an answer in Portuguese. And then I would translate that answer back into English. This process took forever and made conversations feel impossible. But after about 4 months of daily English exposure, something amazing happened. One day, I was in a grocery store. The cashier asked me, "Do you need a bag?" And without thinking, I just said, "No, I have one, thanks." It happened so fast. And then I realized my brain didn't translate. For the very first time, I had thought and answered directly in English. I realized I was finally truly thinking in English. If you are struggling with English right now, here is my advice. First, speak every day. Even if you are alone, use the headphone trick like I did. Second, do your best to stop translating in your head. Start trying to think in English. Third, talk to native speakers, even if it feels scary. Fourth, surround yourself with English. Change the language on your phone. Watch movies and listen to music only in English. And fifth, please do not be afraid of making mistakes. Mistakes are how you grow. And most importantly, never, ever give up. I still remember the day everything changed for me. The day I realized, wow, I can actually speak English. But before I tell you that specific story, let me take you a little deeper into my life in Canada. The struggles, the weirdest things, and how I finally started to speak English like a native. I had been in Canada for about 6 months, and my English was getting better. I could understand people much better. I could order food without feeling that panic in my chest. I could even have simple conversations with my classmates. But I still had one very big problem. I was terrified of talking to native speakers. Why? Because they spoke so fast. They used so much slang, and I always felt stupid when I didn't understand something. I tried to avoid real conversations. If someone I didn't know asked me something, I would just smile and say, yes or haha, yeah, even if I had no idea what they had just said. But I knew this had to change. I knew that if I wanted to be truly fluent, I had to face this fear. So I made a crazy decision. One morning, I walked into my favorite coffee shop. I stood there and told myself, Sophia, today, you are going to have a real conversation with a native speaker. No running away. I stood in the line, feeling so nervous. Then a girl next to me smiled and said, "Gosh, this line is so long." Right, I froze. This was it. This was my moment. I took a deep breath and said, "Yeah, it's really long." Then she said, "I come here every morning, and it's always like this." My brain started to panic. "What do I say now?" it screamed. But instead of overthinking, I just said the first thing that came to my mind. "Oh, really? I just moved here, so I don't know." She smiled a big friendly smile and said, "Oh, cool. Where are you from?" And just like that, we started having a conversation. For the very first time, I wasn't translating in my head. I wasn't scared. I just talked. After that day, something clicked in my brain. I realized I can actually do this. That small moment gave me a huge amount of confidence, and confidence was the key that I had been missing. Now that I was feeling more confident, I wanted to take my English to the next level. I didn't just want to speak English, I wanted to sound like a native speaker. So I started doing something that felt a little crazy. I started using the shadowing method. I began to copy everything I heard. Whenever I watched a TV show, I would pause it and I would repeat the sentence exactly like the actor said it. I tried to match their accent, their tone, and their speed. For example, if I heard the sentence, "Oh my God, that's insane," I would pause the show and say it exactly the same way, trying to copy the emotion. "Oh my God, that's insane." I did this for hours every day. At first it felt very weird talking to myself and making strange faces in my room. But after about a month, my pronunciation improved so much. I also started keeping a special notebook of my English mistakes. Every time I made a mistake in grammar or vocabulary, I wrote it down and then wrote the correct version next to it. For example, I used to say, "I am agree with you." I learned that was wrong. The correct way is "I agree with you." By reviewing my mistakes every day, I slowly stopped repeating them. This next step was the hardest one for me, but I forced myself to make Canadian friends. I knew that was the fastest way to improve. So here is what I did. I joined local events. I went to free meetups online for international students. I also used conversation exchange apps, where I found Canadians who wanted to learn my language, Portuguese. We would do a language exchange, half an hour in English, half an hour in Portuguese. And I stopped being so shy at work. I started chatting more with my coworkers during our breaks. And guess what? The more I talked to real Canadians, the more natural my English became. Even though my English was improving, so much life was still very hard. I was always tired. Studying English, working my part-time job, and cooking all my own food was exhausting. I missed my family so much. I couldn't visit home because the airplane tickets were too expensive. And I struggled with money. Even after 6 months, I still felt broke all the time. I remember one day, I looked at my bank account, and I had only $5 left. $5. I sat in my tiny room, and I just cried. Why is this so hard, I thought. Am I making a mistake? Should I just give up and go back home? But then I remembered why I was there. I remembered my dream. I remembered my parents. I did not come all this way just to give up. So I wiped my tears from my face, and I said to myself, "No, I will make this work." And I did. I want you to imagine something for a moment. Imagine waking up every morning in a beautiful apartment. You look out the window at the city skyline, you drink your morning coffee, and you think to yourself, "I made it. I did it. I became the person I always dreamed of being." That is my life now. But 5 years ago, I was a broke student struggling with English and feeling lost and alone in a foreign country. To get into medical school in Canada, I had to pass the IELTS exam. And let me tell you, it was terrifying. The reading section was full of long, confusing articles. The speaking section made me feel like I was being judged on every single word. The writing section felt like a nightmare. I studied every single day. I practiced writing essays until my hands hurt. I recorded myself speaking and listened back to find my mistakes. I read complicated medical articles to build my vocabulary. On the day of the exam, I walked into the testing room and my body was shaking. But then I told myself, "Sophia, you did not come this far only to fail now. You know this. You worked for this." So I took a deep breath, and I did my best. A week later, I got my results. I passed. I held the paper in my hands, and I started crying. Tears of joy. I did it. I actually did it. That was the moment I knew that nothing could stop me now. With my IELTS score, I was finally accepted into one of the best medical universities in Canada. But guess what? The real struggle was just beginning. The medical textbooks were all in advanced academic English. The professors spoke using complex medical terms. I had to write perfect reports and give presentations in front of the whole class. It was 10 times harder than anything I had faced before. But I remembered something important. I remembered my journey. If I can learn English, I can do anything. So I didn't quit. I recorded all my lectures and listened to them again every night. I made hundreds of flashcards for difficult medical terms. I joined study groups and practiced explaining complex medical ideas in simple English. Every single day, I pushed myself harder and harder. And with lots and lots of hard work, I graduated. I became Dr. Sophia Williams. I remember walking across that stage to receive my diploma. I looked up at the ceiling, and I whispered, "This is for you, Mom and Dad." I made it. After graduation, I got my first job at a big hospital in Toronto. My first month's salary was $8,000. When I saw that number in my bank account, I couldn't believe it. I remembered those days when I had only $5 left when I had to choose between buying food or paying my bus fare. Now I could buy anything I wanted. But the money wasn't the best part. The best part was saving lives. One day, a little girl came into the hospital. She was sick, she was scared, and she was crying. I knelt down, held her hand, and said, "Don't you worry, sweetheart. I'll take care of you." Her mother looked at me with tears in her eyes and said, "Thank you, doctor." At that moment, I felt something I had never felt before. I wasn't just an English learner anymore. I wasn't just a student. I was a doctor. And I had earned this. Now listen to me carefully. I know many people say, accept yourself as you are. I disagree. You should never accept being weak. You should never accept being average. You must change yourself. Not for society, not for your friends, not for your family. You must change yourself for you. Because let me tell you something very important. Nobody is coming to save you. Not your parents, not your teachers, not your boyfriend or girlfriend. Well, you can change your life. When I was struggling, I could have made so many excuses. English is too hard. I don't have enough money. I'm not smart enough. But I didn't. I looked in the mirror and I said, Sophia, stop making excuses. It's time to work. And that is exactly what I did. If you are still here listening to this story, it means you want more from your life. So let me give you the real truth. Learn English like your life depends on it. Because it does. If you want a great career, you need English. Stop being lazy. Get up, open a book, watch English videos, do the work. Put yourself in uncomfortable situations. Talk to strangers. Make mistakes. Embarrass yourself. That is how you grow. Today, I live in a beautiful apartment in downtown Toronto. I wake up every single morning feeling proud of myself. I drive my dream car. I travel to different countries. I help my parents financially. And most importantly, I love my life. But remember, I was not born lucky. I created this life by working for it. And you can too. If you are watching this video, you have two choices. Choice 1, you can close this video and do nothing. You can stay the same, keep making excuses, keep dreaming, but never acting. Or choice 2, you can start working on yourself right now. Learn English every day. Improve yourself. Change your life. The choice is yours. If you choose the second option, then subscribe to this channel, like this video, and let's start your journey together today. Because trust me, when you finally become the best version of yourself, it feels like the whole world is in your hands. Now go change your life.